Times were different back then. Your grandparents didn't have 24-hour supermarkets or grocery delivery apps. When hard times hit, and they hit often, having a well-stocked pantry wasn't just smart, it was survival. They knew something we've forgotten in our age of instant everything. Some foods can last practically forever if you store them right. And I'm not talking about those expensive freeze-dried survival meals that cost a fortune. I'm talking about simple, everyday foods that could sit in a root cellar or pantry for years and still be perfectly good when you needed them most. Today we're counting down 25 survival foods our grandparents stockpiled during hard times. Foods that essentially never expire. So let's dive in, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you find this useful. Powdered drink mixes. Now this might surprise you, but powdered drink mixes were actually a staple in many Depression-era pantries. Not just for the flavor, though a glass of lemonade sure helped make tough times more bearable, but for practical reasons. These powders provided essential electrolytes and vitamins that were hard to come by when fresh fruit was scarce or too expensive. Your grandparents knew that a jar of powdered lemonade or orange drink could last for years if kept dry. During the 1930s, companies started marketing these drinks as health tonics. They weren't wrong either. When you're working hard physical labor all day, those electrolytes matter. And here's something interesting. Many families would water these drinks down significantly, making one container last months instead of weeks. The sugar content also provided quick energy during long workdays. Some folks even used these powders medicinally, mixing them with hot water for sore throats or upset stomachs. Canned chili. Canned chili became a working-class hero during the Great Depression. It was filling, cheap, and lasted forever on the shelf. But here's what most people don't know. The canned chili we think of today is nothing like what your grandparents stockpiled. Back then, it was mostly beans with just enough meat to give it flavor. Companies would can it with extra fat on top, creating a natural seal that helped preserve it even longer. Families would stretch one can of chili to feed 6 or 7 people by adding water, extra beans, or whatever vegetables they had. The beauty of canned chili was its versatility. You could eat it cold if you had to, heat it over a fire, or even trade it for other goods. During World War II, canned chili became so valuable that some families used it as currency in their communities. The protein and calorie density made it perfect emergency food, granola bars or energy bars. Before they were trendy health foods, energy bars were survival rations. Your grandparents made their own versions using oats, honey, dried fruit, and whatever nuts they could afford. These homemade bars could last months without refrigeration. The secret was the honey. It acted as a natural preservative while binding everything together. During the 1940s, families would make huge batches of these bars before winter set in. They knew that having portable, non-perishable food could mean the difference between going hungry and making it through. Kids would carry them to school, workers took them to factories, and farmers kept them in their pockets during harvest. What made these bars so valuable wasn't just their shelf life, it was their nutrient density. One small bar could provide enough energy for several hours of hard labor. Jerky is probably the oldest preserved food on this list. Your grandparents didn't buy it from gas stations. They made it themselves. Every scrap of meat that couldn't be eaten fresh got turned into jerky. Beef, venison, turkey, even fish. The process was simple but crucial for survival. They'd slice the meat thin, salt it heavily, and hang it to dry. Some families had special smokehouses. Others just used their attics or porches. A properly made batch of jerky could last over a year without refrigeration. During the Dust Bowl, when livestock was dying and meat was scarce, families would trade jerky like gold. 1 pound of jerky represented 5 pounds of fresh meat. It was lightweight, portable, and packed with protein. Soldiers in both world wars carried jerky in their packs. Native Americans had been making it for centuries, and they taught early settlers the techniques that your grandparents perfected. Bouillon cubes or powder bouillon cubes were like magic to Depression-era cooks. One tiny cube could turn water and whatever scraps you had into something that resembled soup. These little flavor bombs were invented in the early 1900s, but they really took off during hard times. Your grandparents would buy them in bulk when they could afford it, knowing they'd last years. The salt content alone made them virtually indestructible. But bouillon wasn't just for soup. Creative cooks used it to flavor rice, beans, even bread. Some families would dissolve a cube in hot water as a warming drink during cold winters when tea or coffee was too expensive. The psychological benefit was huge too. Bouillon could make even the most meager meal taste like something special. During World War II, bouillon cubes were included in military rations and sent to prisoners of war. Canned beans. If there was one food that defined survival during the Great Depression, it was canned beans. Navy beans, pinto beans, black beans. It didn't matter. Beans were protein, they were filling, and they were cheap. Your grandparents would buy them by the case when they went on sale. A single can could be stretched into multiple meals. Mix them with a little fat, some wild greens, maybe an onion if you were lucky, and you had dinner. The liquid in the can, what we call aquafaba now, was never wasted. It went into soups, gravies, even used for baking when eggs were scarce. Properly stored canned beans could last 5 years or more past their printed date. Some families had beans in their cellars from the 1930s that were still good in the 1940s. Vinegar was the Swiss Army knife of the pantry. Your grandparents used it for everything, preserving vegetables, cleaning, medicine, and cooking. A gallon jug could last a family years and never go bad. In fact, archaeologists have found vinegar in ancient tombs that's still acidic. During hard times, vinegar became crucial for food preservation. Without refrigeration, families would pickle everything they could: cucumbers, cabbage, eggs, even meat. The acidity killed harmful bacteria and extended food life by months. But here's something most people don't know. During the Spanish flu pandemic, people gargled with vinegar water, believing it would kill germs. They weren't entirely wrong. Vinegar does have antimicrobial properties. Coconut oil. Coconut oil was a luxury for most families, but those who could afford it treated it like liquid gold. Unlike butter or lard, coconut oil could sit in a pantry for 2 to 3 years without going rancid. During World War II, when butter was rationed, coconut oil became a prized substitute. It could be used for cooking, baking, even as a skin moisturizer when soap was scarce. The saturated fat content made it incredibly stable. Families living in warmer climates particularly valued it because it didn't spoil in heat like animal fats did. Some clever homemakers even used it to preserve eggs, coating them in coconut oil to extend their shelf life by weeks. Dried fruits. Before refrigeration was common, dried fruit was how families got their vitamins through winter. Raisins, apricots, apples, prunes, anything that grew locally got dried and stored. The process was simple, but labor-intensive. Fruits were sliced thin and laid out in the sun or hung in attics. The natural sugars concentrated, creating their own preservative. A properly dried batch could last 2 years or more. During the Depression, dried fruit was often the only sweet thing children got. Parents would ration them carefully, a few raisins here, a dried apple there. They were also crucial for preventing scurvy when fresh produce was unavailable. Dried fruits were so valuable, they were often used for bartering. Cornmeal. Cornmeal was the foundation of Southern survival cooking, but during hard times it spread across the country. It was cheap, filling, and incredibly versatile. Your grandparents could make cornbread, mush, polenta, even a crude cereal with it. Stored in a cool, dry place, cornmeal could last 18 months to 2 years. The key was keeping it away from moisture and pests. Many families would store it in metal containers with bay leaves to ward off bugs. During the Civil War and Depression, cornmeal kept entire communities alive. It could be mixed with just water if necessary, though most families added whatever fat they had to make it more palatable. The corn itself provided essential nutrients that were often missing from poverty diets. Canned soup or stews. Commercial canned soup was still relatively new when your grandparents were young, but it quickly became a survival staple. Campbell's soup, introduced in 1895, was marketed as convenient food for busy housewives. But during the Depression, it became emergency rations. One can could be diluted with water or milk to feed a family. The variety meant you could have different meals even with limited resources. Tomato soup with crackers one day, vegetable beef with bread the next. These soups lasted 3 to 5 years past their dates if stored properly. The high sodium content acted as a preservative, and the sealed cans kept everything sterile. Peanut butter. Peanut butter was a relatively new invention during your grandparents' era, but it quickly became essential. High in protein and calories, shelf-stable for months, and requiring no preparation, it was perfect survival food. During World War II, peanut butter was included in soldiers' rations because it provided maximum nutrition in minimum space. Families back home valued it just as much. A jar could provide protein when meat was scarce or too expensive. Children could make their own sandwiches, freeing up parents for work. The oil separation that we see as annoying today was actually beneficial. That layer of oil on top helped preserve the butter underneath. Canned or freeze-dried fruit. While freeze-drying was mostly military technology during your grandparents' time, canned fruit was everywhere. It was often the only fruit available during winter months. Peaches, pears, fruit cocktail. These weren't just desserts. They were vitamin sources. The syrup they were packed in was never wasted. It went into cakes, over pancakes, or diluted as a drink. Some families even used it to make homemade wine during Prohibition. Properly stored canned fruit could last 5 years or more. The high sugar content and sterile canning process meant they were nearly indestructible. Oats were the ultimate survival grain, cheaper than wheat, more nutritious than corn, and incredibly versatile. Your grandparents didn't just make oatmeal. They ground oats into flour, made oatcakes, even oat milk when dairy was scarce. A 50-pound sack could feed a family for months and last years if kept dry. During the Scottish Highland clearances, families survived on little more than oats for months at a time. That knowledge came to America with immigrants who taught others how to make the most of this humble grain. Oats also had medicinal uses, oat baths for skin conditions, oat poultices for wounds. Canned tomatoes. Canned tomatoes were the base of countless Depression-era meals. Soup, sauce, stew. Everything started with tomatoes. They provided vitamin C when fresh vegetables were unavailable and acid that helped preserve other foods. Your grandparents would can hundreds of jars each summer if they had access to fresh tomatoes. The acidity meant they lasted longer than most canned goods, sometimes 10 years or more. During hard times, a can of tomatoes, some pasta or rice, and whatever scraps were available became a meal. Italian immigrant families taught their neighbors how to make filling meals from almost nothing but tomatoes and flour. Canned meats. Spam gets all the attention, but your grandparents stockpiled all kinds of canned meat. Vienna sausages, corned beef, chicken, salmon, anything with protein that could sit on a shelf. These weren't gourmet foods, but they were literal lifesavers. During World War II, canned meat fed both soldiers and civilians. Spam alone kept millions alive across the Pacific. Families learned to doctor these meats with spices and vegetables to make them palatable. Canned meat could last 5 to 10 years past its date if the can remained intact. The fat content, which we avoid today, was actually prized then. Fat meant calories, and calories meant survival. Salt wasn't just seasoning, It was the primary preservation method before refrigeration. Your grandparents used it to cure meat, preserve vegetables, and extend the life of everything from eggs to fish. A family would buy salt in 25 or 50-pound bags, knowing it would never go bad, ever. Salt found in ancient Egyptian tombs is still perfectly usable. During the Civil War, salt was so valuable that it was used as currency. Southern families would burn the dirt floor of smokehouses to extract salt. The Union's salt blockade was a major factor in the Confederacy's defeat. Your grandparents remembered these stories and kept plenty on hand. Powdered milk. Fresh milk spoiled in days, but powdered milk lasted years. Your grandparents might not have loved the taste, but they recognized its value. It provided calcium and protein when fresh dairy was unavailable or too expensive. During the Depression, the government distributed powdered milk to families in need. Kids grew up thinking it was normal. The trick was mixing it the night before and chilling it, that improved the taste significantly. Powdered milk was also used in baking when eggs were scarce. It could be reconstituted thicker to replace cream or thinner for regular milk. Honey. Honey is the only food that literally never spoils. Archaeologists have found 3,000-year-old honey in Egyptian tombs that's still edible. Your grandparents knew this and prized honey above sugar. It was medicine, sweetener, and preservative all in one. During hard times, families who kept bees had gold in their backyard. A single hive could produce enough honey to trade for other necessities. Honey was used to treat wounds. Its antimicrobial properties are now scientifically proven. It soothed sore throats, preserved fruits, and even made alcoholic mead when times were really tough. White sugar might seem basic, but during your grandparents' time, it was carefully rationed and stored. Sugar never spoils if kept dry. Never. It might clump or harden, but it's still perfectly good. During both World Wars, sugar was one of the first things rationed. Families were issued ration books, limiting them to half a pound per person per week. Those who had stockpiled sugar before rationing started were sitting pretty. Sugar wasn't just for sweetening. It preserved fruit, cured meat, and could even be used to treat wounds in emergencies. Flour, all-purpose flour, was the backbone of survival baking. Bread, biscuits, pancakes, dumplings, flour made them all possible. Your grandparents would buy flour in 50-pound sacks, and those sacks became dish towels and clothing afterward. Nothing was wasted. Stored properly in metal containers, flour could last over a year. During the Depression, flour companies realized women were using their sacks for fabric, so they started printing them with colorful patterns. This feed sack fabric clothed millions of children. Flour was so valuable that mills would give credit to trusted customers, knowing the debt would be paid after harvest. Dried beans and lentils. If canned beans were good, dried beans were better. They lasted longer, took up less space, and were even cheaper. Your grandparents would buy them in bulk, 100-pound sacks if they could afford it. Properly stored dried beans can last 30 years. 30 years. Archaeologists have sprouted 1,000-year-old beans found in Native American ruins. During the Dust Bowl, families moving west would pack wagons with dried beans, knowing they'd have protein no matter what. Beans and cornbread became the meal that built America. The combination provides complete protein, something your grandparents didn't know scientifically, but understood practically. Dried pasta was immigrant food that became American survival food. Italian families taught their neighbors that pasta could last years if kept dry. It was cheaper than bread, more versatile than rice, and children actually liked it. During the Depression, pasta with just butter or oil and salt was a common meal. If you had a can of tomatoes, you were eating well. The beauty of pasta was its simplicity: flour and water, maybe eggs if you were lucky. Families would make their own and dry it for storage. Even store-bought pasta would last 2 to 3 years past its printed date. Rice was the global survival grain that American families learned to appreciate during hard times. White rice, stored properly, can last 30 years, some say indefinitely. Your grandparents would buy it in 50-pound bags and store it in metal containers with bay leaves to prevent bugs. Rice was breakfast porridge, lunch side dish, and dinner base. Mixed with beans, it created complete protein. During the Depression, Chinese immigrants taught their neighbors how to stretch rice into dozens of different dishes. A cup of dry rice could feed a family when cooked with enough water. Rice water was saved for baby formula when milk was unavailable. Canned vegetables. The number one survival food your grandparents stockpiled was canned vegetables. Green beans, corn, carrots, peas. These were the vitamins and minerals that prevented malnutrition during hard times. Every summer, families would can hundreds of jars. It was hot, exhausting work, but it meant food security through winter. The canning process, perfected in the 1800s, was revolutionary. It meant vegetables picked in July could be eaten in January. During both World Wars, the government encouraged victory gardens and home canning. Properly canned vegetables could last 5 to 10 years. Some families still have jars their grandparents canned that are theoretically still safe to eat. And there you have it, 25 foods our grandparents stockpiled that essentially never expire. These weren't fancy survival foods. They were practical, affordable staples that meant the difference between thriving and merely surviving during the hardest times in American history. Which of these foods do you still keep in your pantry? Let us know in the comments below. And hey, if you found this useful, give us a like and subscribe for more practical wisdom from the past. Until next time, stay prepared.